Hi, welcome back to Plus This. I'm Kathy Deach, and we're back in the studio because last week I really tried it and tried to do this without UBN and their crew, and it was like hollering, laughing, ridiculous. I went back and watched it myself because I could not believe what happened. And Nikki was there with me, and she is today too. Nikki Bailey is here, everyone, to help co-host this tonight. She's coming from her cute office, which I just love, and her cute lipstick, bomb.
Thank you.
Yes, happy Thursday, my love. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I had a nice little relaxation, energetic healing thing today, distance healing thing today. That was very nice and meditative. So I'm feeling very like I'm on it. I got it. It's all good.
That's great. That's great. And I love that you have a little animal print in your background. And I have, if you're not watching at home, a full leopard jumpsuit that I got from Avenue, who has been bought by City Chic. I'm supporting. And it really was, it wasn't really because of the Tiger King documentary series. If you're not watching it on Netflix, just get your life and start watching it. Because I'm not really like supporting that life, but I will hold every piece of animal print from the store and like she was hilarious. I want us to talk about our guests a little bit. I mean, what's kind of fun about and there you're like, and everyone's Skyping or Zooming, so it's like okay that people are doing that. And even though we love having people together in the studio, I get to hit up all these like we have an incredible author of the book Anti-Diet: Reclaim Your Life, Money, Well-Being, and Happiness Through Intuitive Eating. I mean, that is like the truest, bombest title of a book ever. And she is an anti-diet nutritionist and all kinds of things, actually. She has many, many letters after her name. And really, and I know, Nikki, you have too. She writes such good her Twitter, if you prefer Twitter, if you don't like Instagram. I know a lot of people don't. She really has helped me through a lot of tough times, but particularly Harrison is here. Hi, Christy.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, it's so glad to finally meet you, even if it's virtually. We'll get you to LA when all of this is over. How's that?
Yes. I was supposed to come to LA actually at the end of April for one of the things that's still happening online. But yeah,
okay,
once this all happens.
Yeah, when this is all over and people reorganizing and you feel like you're going to come back, open invitation to have you here.
Oh,
please
thank you.
Awesome. With food and our, to the point of feeling like we needed a 12-step program for some of our food issues. I mean, I definitely think that I have evolved in my idea about eating. I think I had obsessive thoughts about food because of wanting to be small. And once I got rid of the feeling like I needed to be small, those feelings went away. But I will say that when I was in 12-step, I had a crazy pink cloud moment when people were like, you don't have to plan anything. You don't have to follow any kind of food plan. Like not having a food plan might be your plan. And that was the first time I was like, what? Like, I don't have to care about what I eat. And, the freedom of that, I think, was the start of it. And I was just wondering for the work you do, what do you feel like is the question that people come to you the most with? Like, what do you feel like most people lead with in the work that you do?
That's a great question. I think it's like either how do I stop binging, or how do I stop eating when I'm full, or how do I stop eating so much sugar, or insert quote unquote bad food here, right? So it's all about kind of like, how do I stop doing this and start becoming more of the eater that I'm supposed to be, the like thin person that's trapped inside me. I think that's the subtext of a lot of it, even if people don't say that. It's like, how do I stop eating so that I will stop gaining weight, or so that I will lose weight?
And then you feel like you have to sort of turn that around, probably.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's, even, I mean, like with what I put out there and the marketing that I do and what people know me for, I think I'm known enough for anti-diet stuff that most of the time people don't come to me directly asking for weight loss. They come to me with more, they think that they're anti-dieting. They think that they're off the diet train. They think that they're starting to engage in intuitive eating. And they'll ask these questions that sort of reveal this like deep well of diet culture that still needs to be unpacked. And I think that's where, the really interesting work is. I love working with clients who are in that space of like wanting to give up dieting and believing they've given up dieting, and then helping them see, oh, actually, I'm still holding on to dieting in so many covert and small ways, even including this desire to stop binging or stop eating emotionally or stop eating so much sugar or whatever it might be. That's actually coming from the diet mentality. And that's actually coming from this desire to be thin and this desire to meet societal standards of what, so-called good and bad foods are, and by extension, good and bad people. Because, diet culture really is this moralizing set of beliefs that moralizes about food, demonizes some foods while elevating others, stigmatizes larger bodies, all of that. That's the belief system that we've all inherited growing up in this culture. It takes a long time, and it's quite a process. But the initial question usually is something like, how do I stop doing XYZ?
Sort of let go of that I need to be thinner idea. Some of the sort of compulsive behavior around food changed for you. And that's interesting for me because I found that, I've been on this sort of like anti-diet same time, even after 6 years of therapy with an eating disorder specialist, even after 12 step groups and all that, I still have. And, even now that I'm like, it's funny because I can like intellectually think about it while I am doing it. I am thinking on the diet culture, like, girl, eat your food, calm down. So I think it's really one of those things that like, it's not like for me at least, it's not for those who are both new to this idea, but also for those of us who have been on this train, riding this train for decades and still are like, what?
Totally. I think it is such a process, right? Because we've been in the womb, we're dieting, or we're told not to gain too much weight, or we're restricted, or we're deprived of food from food insecurity, or what have you. So I think all of us have this legacy of trauma around food and bodies. And so I think it definitely can be such a process, more so than, I definitely know people who are more like you, Nikki, who are like, I've got my mindset. I feel like it's on board with how that work that often needs to happen around, uncovering those hidden diet culture beliefs. And I've seen people who sort of uncover in the work that we're doing together, like, oh my God, we were poor when I was a kid. We were food insecure. We had food stamps for maybe even just a short period of that. One moment is really deeply lodged in there. And of course, for people who've had years and years of that stuff, it's even more compounded, where the restrict binge cycle gets sort of inculcated by not having food, but sort of needing to know and needing to reassure yourself that you're secure with food, that you can really have whatever you want. And then, because at the end of the month, the food's going to be gone, the money's going to be gone, and you're going to be hungry again. And so that sort of situation, either modeling of dieting or foisting of dieting onto you as the child, can be really traumatic and really deeply embedded in there, so that your idea of what it means to be a grown woman, for example, might be really wedded to needing to diet, or your idea of what it is source of love in a context maybe where deprivation was also happening. So I think all of those things, can create a more difficult, make it more difficult to untangle those diet culture ties and diet culture.
It's like,
Totally.
oh yeah,
I'm sitting here just nodding my head like, yup,
yeah,
that too, yup,
yeah, yeah. Especially, especially when you're saying like the insecurity. I mean, Nikki and I have kidded a lot about how clever our parents were from the discount place, you know what I mean, and managed to find some eggs that were cheap, and so we had French toast, you know what I mean. Like your parents sort of find these ways to make food insecurity sort of fun, and so then there's such a familial attachment to that too. A lot of my struggle when I was in program was feeling like an outsider to my family, like me trying to see me separate from my family. And that hurt. Like, not participating in the things that we participate at home, and feeling like us eating this way is the way our family does this. And especially when you feel like you're somebody who lives away from home and you'll feel like an outsider. For a while, my mother and I would have sort of like staring contests at our plates. I don't know that she ever would admit that. And I love my mother very much. You know, she's a great mom. But she had a lot of feelings about what I was eating all the time. I'm sure you have things that you're feeling about that too.
Yeah, I was just remembering my mom had this habit of, if you were eating with her, if there was something blocking her ability to see your plate, she would move that thing so she could then watch her slide it away. Like, and even after I moved away from home, her first question was, "What did you eat today?" You know, like, and it was policing, and as much as it was also making sure that I was getting enough food when I lived away from home. But I kind of grew up with this feeling that, like, like, we had food, but food, like the good food, was hidden because I had a thin brother, and so they would hide food for him that was just for him, and then I would find it, and then I would sneak it and eat it, and then I'd get in trouble for sneaking it and eating it. So there's like, so even now, like, I will hide food from myself now, and it's weird because, like, in my mind, I am completely done with all my food issues, but I know that I'm not because I still do. Like, I still hide food from myself, and I still, when all of this COVID-19 thing started, my first thought was, we have to get more food. Like, we can't, like, what if we run out of food? I wasn't even worried about the contagion. So it's just really interesting how deeply entrenched in us it is, and how far back it goes. I mean, I was on my first diet when I was in kindergarten. So it's so complicated and so deeply embedded in who I am as a person, that it's sort of like I'm always peeling away a little layer of it and a little layer of it, which is why it's so important to be able to access resources like you, Christy, because like, some days I look at your Instagram and I'm like, oh right, yeah, okay, I don't have to do that. I don't have to be freaked out about, like, I can just have this. So yeah.
Christy, this
I'm
time
so
is
glad to
really
hear that's been
triggering
helpful.
people. Yeah, I would think that you're probably seeing a lot of people triggered, but at this time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, what you were saying about, wanting to make sure you had enough food, I think is really the case for a lot of people, and especially anyone who's had any sort of history with food deprivation, whether that was from dieting imposed on them at a young age, or dieting that they engaged in later in life, or food insecurity that was imposed on them from outside, or even some people, I would say the vast, vast majority of people in this culture have some form of disordered eating, just because we live in diet culture, and that is the water we're swimming in. But even those rare folks who don't have any food issues, who never did, and who are, grew up with food security and intuitive eating and all of that, are being triggered now as well. I'm seeing it in people kind of all across the spectrum, where, of course, if you had pre-existing food issues, it's that much more difficult right now with the food scarcity that's happening, and seeing empty grocery store shelves, and seeing people talking about food in this hoarding sort of way, and feeling like you need to get it all now, or else you're not going to be able to have it. Like, it is incredibly anxiety producing for people.
Yeah, and of course that comfort of eating is also an issue. It's very funny. We talk about the I mean, I've talked about it on here before, about like most of the serotonin produced in your body is in your digestive tract. So of course we go to food to feel relaxed, to feel good. And yet at this time, people still feel like that's dangerous behavior, because they feel like I might not have enough. So it's like this thing that is a comfort gets judged. And also, there was a time when I was in program, for sure, that when I wasn't eating and I was restricting, I also enjoyed being out of it. And it took me a while to put that part together, because I think deep down I thought me restricting was the righteous part of me, right? That was like the moral part of me that had good discipline.
You were doing well. You were on track, and you were being good.
Yeah, and I was being like really disciplined. And then what I realized was that I was not clear. I was hazy, and I would restrict to the point of like not really being in my body. And that also was something I was getting a benefit from. And I'm wondering if at this time people are going through that. I mean, I know that my sleeping cycle has been just blown up to bits, and therefore my eating cycle has sort of like went right along with it. And I was just wondering if is there any advice that you can give that you feel like is I know we all kind of like want tips, and like a lot of times it's not really tips, but maybe a thought to have, or something to suggest that you think about maybe is better than a tip. I don't want to sound like I'm cosmopolitan trying to get tips out of you.
I mean, I think my biggest sort of piece of advice, I guess, or something to think about is self-compassion, because right now this is a really scary time. We're in a time of it's this unprecedented thing for pretty much all of our lives. Like nobody I know has ever seen anything like this in their lifetime. And, barring people's grandparents maybe living through the Great Depression. But, I think this is kind of on that level, right? This is a really unprecedented, scary, anxiety-provoking thing. And so having compassion for yourself for trying to cope with that in whatever way you have to do it, whatever means you need to use in order to cope. I think it's completely understandable that we're falling back on these old coping mechanisms in some cases, including for some folks restricting, and, for other folks turning to food for comfort and maybe binging or feeling like we're emotionally eating, which, by the way, like that's a whole separate piece that we could talk about. But emotional eating, the concept of emotional eating, is actually pretty fraught, and really researchers think that it isn't truly about eating to soothe emotions at all, so much as eating in response to deprivation. That when we've been restricted, when we've been deprived, we're more likely to turn to food for comfort in difficult times than if we haven't. And non-dieters, people who've kind of always been intuitive eaters, or people who've relearned intuitive eating and really clicked back into that, don't tend to turn to food for comfort as much in these difficult moments. And, so that's not to say that there's anything wrong with turning to food for comfort, but we're probably going to do that more right now because this is such an unprecedented time, and that's okay. Have compassion for that. I'm seeing on the screen one of my tweets, which is like, it's okay if you're eating differently right now, right? It's okay if your eating is out of whack. It's okay if you're eating at weird times and weird things and eating more. I think that there's this diet culture pressure on people right now when we are sort of gravitating towards foods that are comforting and eating for pleasure and eating for coping, that we're then made to feel like that's bad, that's wrong, that's, we're off plan, we're ruining our diet, we're ruining our health, we're setting ourselves up for disaster. And of course, we're going to gain weight, right? That's the diet culture message, is like, oh no, you're going to gain weight and that's bad.
I mean, it's really so rampant right now. It's so I mean, and
the memes.
Listen,
memes about diet, and
I love my Broadway friends. I love them. I know that they're going stir crazy. I know they're the hardest working people, literally probably in all of New York. That schedule is brutal. They're all athletes. I get it. But if I see one more person write some crazy fat shaming thing about me before, COVID, me after, and like that, literally their biggest anxiety is that they're going to gain weight. Or I don't even know if it is anxiety, quite honest. Like, I can't really judge it, I guess. But some of it feels faux. Some of it feels like, well, we get to make fun of something, so let me make fun of this. But it really is, like, if there's one message I could get across to anybody who's on my timeline watching this on Facebook is to please just keep in mind that not everybody has a body that looks like yours, and that's like really a privilege that you even get to say, oh, I hope I don't look this way. And really, like, what the repercussions of that is. I mean, it makes me like want to shut down Facebook altogether. I do want to sort of talk about going from that sort of like social coping mechanism that people are doing to something that's like much more dangerous. And I sent out a Reuters article. I'm not posting it on our page because I don't want to spread it around. But it does give a lot of information about the numbers that are coming out of both national COVID patients and specifically New York as compared to New Orleans. And it basically makes the claim that obesity is a huge problem, and that's why people in New Orleans are dying at a higher rate. So fat phobia right now is causing people's lives. I know this for a fact. I'm not I'm saying this, and we will find out all of the numbers later, but I know for a fact that fat phobia is killing people today. It always has been, but with COVID, it is literally keeping people from COVID getting the care that they need. And I mean, I wish there was a way to sort of investigate that further, but this article kind of gave us a point of view on it. Basically, it's saying that chronic illness is what's putting most people in the ICU. And then it gives like a bunch of numbers. And they say that obesity is part of the problem, but then the percentage of obese patients is actually less than the percentage of the national average of obese people. And I bet if we got numbers specifically in New Orleans, that guys, I'm saying obese, and I really just know that I'm mentally putting quotes around it because it's like all a bunch of garbage to me, and I know it's a slur. And I wish I had a boop. Maybe I should just be like boop every time I say it. But just know I'm putting quotes around it. And I'm cocking my head to the side when I say it. But I'm sure the percentages of fat people in New Orleans is actually higher than the nation. And the fact that 31% of those patients are obese is actually lower than the national average, which is 40%, and probably way lower than what New Orleans is. So actually, fat people are doing pretty okay at the ICU. Yes. I mean, not to be a joke, but I mean, I can do math. Like, I know what math is. So do you get to talk to doctors about this? If you were coming to LA to talk to a panel, like, does that include an audience of doctors? Do you get in the room with people, and what are they saying when this is your point of view? I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I do sometimes talk to doctors. It's interesting because I think there are far fewer doctors doing this work and open to learning about health at every size and intuitive eating and anti-diet stuff than any other profession, like dietitians, therapists, personal trainers, et cetera. I feel like I see far more of those other professions represented in the talks that I do, but I do get, a few awesome medical students or doctors at every talk. And I feel like they are fighting the good fight and working so hard to try to bring the health at every size message into their institutions. And it's really sometimes like banging your head against a wall to talk to medical professionals and to talk to doctors specifically, because I think that doctors are so entrenched in this idea that so-called obesity, and heavy air quotes around that, right? Quote unquote obesity is bad for people's health, is a disease. This idea that it's supposedly a disease came out of the American Medical Association in 2013. So it's actually a very new concept. And that designation of it as a disease went against the American Medical Association's own advisory board that was dedicated to studying this topic.
Of course.
The advisory board said, don't do it. Don't call it a disease. It's problematic. It doesn't meet the criteria for a disease. And the American Medical Association went ahead and did it anyway. And what I think that's about is really pharmaceutical industry influence and weight loss industry influence in the medical community. And, I wrote a whole bunch about this in my book. There's a long history of that with regard to labeling quote unquote obesity as a disease, or even calling it that, right? Calling it a health condition of any kind. And so when it comes to this, statistical stuff on the percentage of COVID patients who are twisting the statistics to its own ends, right? Because as we see in this example of the New Orleans article, it's really true. Only 25% of the people, quote unquote, obesity rate than the national average, but the national average is 40%. So fatness actually seems to be protective in that sense. But, other studies and statistics that have been coming out there, in the UK, there were obesity must be a risk factor. 70% of people that, you know, more or less in the UK are in larger bodies. And so, you know, it's just that people are being statistically represented in COVID-19 critical cases. It's not actually that body size is a risk factor in and of itself. And I think we're in a situation now where there's this absence of real statistical analysis. There's an absence of real scientific evidence because it's all happening so fast. This is also new. And, you know, researchers haven't been able to do like real statistical analysis yet to look at, is there any sort of statistically significant difference here in these population sizes, you know, for people who have diabetes, people who have heart disease, people who are larger bodied. You know, there is a little bit of evidence, at least on diabetes and heart disease, showing that those do seem to be risk factors. But I think that they're conflated. Those things are always lumped together with body size, right? The article we're talking about was like obesity related conditions such as, you know, cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And it's like, no, these are not the same thing, right? We need to stop blaming body size for those conditions. Weight stigma and weight cycling can explain any excess risk we see in people in larger bodies with those conditions or for those conditions. And, you know, it's clear in this article too, that like a much higher percentage of people who had heart disease or diabetes or lung disorders, pre-existing lung issues, were the ones at greater risk. And the people in larger bodies, it actually seemed to be a protective factor. Although even one of those things, I forget whether it was diabetes or heart disease, also seemed a little bit protective in the sense that fewer people who had, you know, a smaller percentage of people were dying or having critical conditions in COVID-19 than the population who had that condition. So, you know, statistics are so, it's so important to do real statistical analysis and look at the numbers. And like you said, you know, we can do math, right? We can figure this out, but it just floors me how few journalists who are reporting on this stuff and how few people in media and social media are actually picking up on that and being like, hey, wait a minute, this actually doesn't say that so-called obesity is a risk factor or quote unquote overweight and obesity are risk factors. This says that either people in larger bodies are just being statistically represented in the population of people with COVID-19, or potentially those larger body sizes are actually somewhat protective factors.
So I'm curious about what should the headline be? You know, if we're, you know, part of what happens is, you know, people don't read articles anymore. They read the headlines and they think they know. Mm-hmm. So if we were going to sort of talk about this headline, I'm thinking about, I'm just thinking about, you know, articles that I've seen that are making this connection and making this, saying that there is a connection between obesity and COVID-19. What would an alternative headline be to sort of correct some of that misinformation?
It's a great question. I think like for this article we're talking about from Reuters, the headline would be larger body size or higher body weight may be a protective factor for fatal COVID-19. Right? And in some of the other cases that I mentioned, you know, it could be something like populations of COVID-19 patients in the ICU are about as fat as we would expect given the distribution of body sizes in the population. Nothing to see here. Right.
Right.
For sure. I want to take, is it okay, Kurt, can I put you through a little break? Because I do want to, is that okay? We're going to take a little breather so we can all drink water. And I want to come back and I want to talk about the next steps and like, how do we start a lobby, basically, to lobby the government to change? That's all. We'll be dealing with that.
That's a very simple question. We'll do that one.
Real so easy.
For the last 10 minutes. We'll be back in this. After show, hopefully we have 10 people giving $5
on the Patreon.
If 10 people give $5 a month, we could do a whole season without getting money from people we don't trust. Isn't that nice? Guys, I'm literally trying to pimp myself to dating apps to try to get us money. Ooh. I'm scared. Don't make me do that. Ooh. Just give us $5. After show, hopefully we have 10 people giving $5
on the Patreon.
If 10 people give $5 a month, we could do a whole season without getting money from people we don't trust. Isn't that nice? Guys, I'm literally trying to pimp myself to dating apps to try to get us money. Ooh. I'm scared. Don't make me do that. Ooh. Just give us $5.
After show.
Hi guys, it's Kathy from Plus This. I'm getting ready for season 5. Can you believe it's been 5 seasons already? We start back March 12th at 6 p.m. at UVN Go. Per usual, this season, I'm not just going to have one host, I'm going to have all the hosts. It's going to be Kathy and friends, and more importantly, it's going to be Kathy and friends and you, because we're dedicating one whole segment to have a conversation with one of our viewers about how fatness is perceived in the world for them and like what challenges they have. So I want to talk about it. I want to help you if I can. I want to take the things I've learned from amazing guests over 4 seasons and start to help you out. So email me at plusthisshow@gmail.com or DM me in my Instagram at plusthisshow, and you could be on Plus This Show. I'll see you March 12th. It's so weird watching yourself look exactly the same as you do, but just with a different thing of clothing on.
I was like so confused. I was like, is she back? I can't hear anything.
That's what I thought too. I was like, no, but she's wearing something different now. That's what's happening.
I know. It's just like, it doesn't change. I think I've plateaued, guys. I think this is all you're getting. This is what it's going to be for the rest of time.
It's amazing. I'll take it.
Well, thank you. So I'm so glad you talked about that stuff that happened in 2013. I think that we are coming to a place where all kinds of systems feel like they're falling apart, and that is really kind of exciting. I also am excited about the amount of organizing that could happen at this time, because people literally don't have anything else to do. And there is so much injustice that is sort of bubbling to the surface that we can no longer walk across the cracks of. Like, it is bubbling up, and like it is going to change, or it's going to end us. I think it's like now or never. What I am wondering, what do you like if we had like a dream platform? I think undoing what they did in 2013 for sure is something I would love to see. You know, in Massachusetts, they just had the state legislature accepted a bill about anti-discrimination for size and height of people. So and hopefully that will be voted on. I mean, I'm going to lobby and try to see if I can help them with in any kind of way about that. What things do you see that exist in the medical industry, especially insurance, I'm sure, is like all kinds of crazy. But like, what things could we like work on learning more about in order to untangle it? I think definitely when you're saying like taking obesity out of the equation when it comes to health is a big one. And I think that it's going to take our government to have to start that movement. And I'm just curious about like what other things do you feel like are problems that even just in your practice that you see people sort of like repeating the things they hear and going, well, actually, the truth is this. I was just curious about what are your like, if you can give me like top 3. You don't have to give all of them to me.
Yeah, no, totally. It's like, I feel like that maybe the top one is my doctor told me I needed to lose weight for, insert health condition here: diabetes, heart disease, reducing risk of cancer, pre-diabetes, which is actually a bogus diagnosis. And I talk more about that on the podcast. I have, if you search for pre-diabetes on my website, I have a whole thing about that. But, there's the podcast. Having people, doctors telling people that they need to lose weight to manage certain health conditions, I think is the biggest problem that I see. And if we could teach doctors and other healthcare professionals, and that includes, naturopaths, physician's assistants, nurse practitioners, anyone who's like a primary care resource for people, if we can teach them about weight stigma and the harmful effects that it has on people's health, and help them to just remove any talk of weight and body size from their interventions with people, I think that would go a really long way. And, I do have clients who found doctors or nurse practitioners or naturopaths or what have you, who are able to agree to take weight out of the equation, take that off the table, are able to take restrictive eating off the table for people who've had disordered relationships with food and don't want to, be subject to an elimination diet because they have IBS, or told to, cut out XYZ foods because they have migraines or whatever it might be. There are doctors willing to listen and willing to do that work. And I think as patients and as clients, we can advocate for ourselves, and we can talk to our providers and ask them to agree to that, to take weight out of the equation and to take restrictive eating practices off the table. Because there's so many things our providers can do for us that, are every sort of health condition that's out there. Really, there is an evidence-based intervention that has nothing to do with weight and has nothing to do with food, right? There are physiological things that people can do. There are medications people can take. There are other, I hesitate to say lifestyle changes because it's such a diety term, but I'm talking about things like, for acid reflux, wearing loose fitting pants, elevating the head of your bed, not eating spicy food 2 hours before you go to bed, things that are really simple that have nothing to do with changing the type of food you eat or the amount of food you eat or, shrinking your body in any way, but that are about, helping you promote health in whatever way. So I think that's one thing is, getting doctors and other medical practitioners on board with weight inclusive, weight neutral interventions. I think another thing, I don't think that anytime soon we're going to be able to get quote unquote obesity off the American Medical Association's agenda of, the label of the disease, I think is around for the time being. And I think we're going to have to chip away at that through larger scale cultural change that is going to start with these little interventions with our doctors, asking them to practice health at every size with us. But I think one thing for insurance purposes, because insurance companies are a real enforcer of this idea of BMI as a so-called disease state or something that needs to be intervened upon, telling doctors or whoever, nurses, whoever is weighing you at the doctor's office that I'd prefer not to be weighed, right? I decline to be weighed. You can write refused in my chart if you like, because insurance companies pressure medical institutions to include weight as a biometric, anthropometric measure, in addition to, height and blood pressure and other things, oxygen in your blood. And they're supposed to include at least 3, or, a lot of insurance companies require that. So if you can say a refused for the weight and get them to take other things, your temperature, your blood oxygen, your blood pressure, your height, if that's possible without stepping on the scale, that will satisfy the insurance requirements. And that will send a message that, weight is something that you don't want to have be part of your healthcare. And I know that that is easier to do for people who have more thin privilege, or people who are fat accepting and able to advocate for themselves and feel comfortable doing that in a doctor's office with someone who is kind of an authority figure and might, say something negative if you refuse to step on the scale. So do what feels right to you, do what feels within your power. And if you're someone who is struggling and doesn't have that privilege, don't feel pressure to have to do that, but let people who have the privilege, who have the thick skin and the knowledge and the sort of, years in the trenches of learning fat acceptance, let us advocate for you. Let us, refuse to be weighed, so that more and more doctors' offices will become wise to the fact that the scale shouldn't be a part of the equation in any healthcare setting. And, that way, if a doctor has heard someone say, I don't do scales, I refuse to be weighed. I love that phrase, by the way. Like, I don't do scales. I say that all the time at the doctor's office, and they're, usually give me a pass. If they've heard me say that, or if they've heard you all say that, then the person who comes in who's maybe feels less able to advocate for themselves but wants to try and dip a toe in, the nurse might be like, do you do scales? Are you okay with the scale? And then that opens the door for that person to say, no, I'd rather not.
That's so interesting, because I've heard about turning around and not looking at the, like, people who are like, I'm not going to look at my weight and I don't want you to tell me what my weight is, but really to refuse. And, it's a hard search, especially out here in LA, for being a huge city. Haze doctors are hard to come by. I had a couple of Haze who are very active in the actual website, reach out to me and ask me to start a campaign because they wanted people in LA like to really get people's names on the Haze, directory and let them know. And I think that's really great. And I think that there's a way, like when you were saying, like to make it, I don't do scales. You can put that and like even just with that information of, I know I can refuse and I am refusing. Because I don't think people, you go there usually because you are worried about something, I mean, I know I don't go to the doctor unless I'm worried about something. I never go just cause. I never am just like strolling into the doctor being like, I'm fierce today. How you doing, doctor? Like, that's not my thing. So you're already like worried. And I think you're right. Like people just kind of go in being like, I just don't want to be worried anymore. I want to be told that everything's okay. So
Yeah.
to have that bravery or to have like the script ready to go, right, Nikki?
I was going to say the script is really helpful, and and the I don't do scales is I kind of say it very similarly, is like I don't do getting weighed, and I have over time taught my doctor and her staff. They ask me now when I come in, are we getting weighed today? And I say no. My doctor was also really receptive after I ended up having weight loss surgery and a whole bunch of crap happened and I almost died. And after that experience, my doctor got really interested in learning how to treat me here instead of trying to change how I look. And so she's worked hard to change her language, and I'm super grateful for that because I know fat folks who haven't been to the doctors in decades because they're just so afraid of having to hear that if you just lost weight, you'd feel better speech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christy,
and that's like one of the tolls of weight stigma. That's one of the huge physical tolls of weight stigma is people not going to the doctor because they don't feel safe. And people, even when they go to the doctor, getting misdiagnosed and getting told that their condition is because of their weight, getting told to lose weight instead of being given evidence-based medicine. My friend and colleague, Reagan Chastain, who I know has been on your show before,
we love her.
Yes.
Amazing. And, has told the story of going to the doctor for strep throat and being told to lose weight as though that somehow was connected or a cure for strep throat, which is ridiculous. And so, I think that if those of us who have the privilege and the knowledge and sort of the standing in fat acceptance can advocate for better treatment, even if it's as small as just saying, I don't do scales, or educating your doctor on health at every size, I think we can hopefully help people down the line not be subjected to such fat phobia at the doctor's office that results in worse health outcomes for them.
Yeah, Christy, I wanted to ask you while we have a few minutes left. There is a what is the word? An issue, maybe I'll just call it an issue, that comes up when thin people are given the mic about fat issues. There is sort of a contingency of fat activists that really want it to be fat people who say the things, and are given the people to be the center of that conversation. I was just wondering, do you come across that? Do you ever have somebody say, I think that what you do is great, but I really would rather hear it from a fat person?
Definitely. Oh yeah. I mean, I've heard that in various forms. I've heard, people who are really against me even existing and doing the work I do at all, who'd rather I just go away. And there's people who, would say, well, I'd rather work with a dietitian who's in a larger body, or I'd rather work with, whatever health professional who's fat and not see a thin provider. And I totally understand that. I get that 100%. I get why people feel that way. The thing is, I think from my perspective, coming from the health professions and also coming from journalism, that's my original background, I think that there is a certain amount of thin privilege that sort of opens the door for these conversations in those spaces that shouldn't exist. It shouldn't be reserved for thin people to be able to talk about these things, or to be able to get articles published, or be able to, get in the ears of doctors and fellow dietitians and have them listen. But the sad reality is, because we live in such a fat phobic society, I have this key, I have this privilege that unlocks that door. And I've had people tell me, people who eventually became fat activists in their own right, who are fat, who are marginalized in other ways. Like, I was willing to listen to you. I came into this work because of your podcast, because I saw your picture on that little square in the podcast charts. And I thought, maybe she has some secret that can teach me how to be thin. And I wasn't going to listen to someone who looked like me at that point. And through your work and through being introduced to all of these amazing fat activists that you talk with, I was able to come into my own fat acceptance and fat liberation practice. And now I'm doing this work. And, I think that is my role. I think my role is to sort of be the place to catch people who are early in that process, who aren't willing to hear these messages from someone in a larger body. And hopefully I can, what I really try to do on my podcast is have such a diversity of people talking about these issues, primarily fat people. I try to have mostly fat activists and, people in larger bodies talking about these issues, but also trans people, people of color, people with disabilities, older people of all kinds of diverse backgrounds that aren't given enough of a platform. And me, because of the way I look and because of the unearned privileges that I happen to be born with, people are more willing to take it from me. And so I'm like, here, listen to this person, here, listen to that person. And hopefully with that, using that privilege to pass people along to the activists who are doing this work, who are in a more marginalized position, it will help folks start to listen to them and start to recognize that their opinion is valuable and important, and go deeper into this work of their own healing and relationships with food in their bodies.
That's so great. I can't believe that 50 minutes has gone by so fast. This is so crazy. And I was, as a good friend of mine, works for the Anti-Defamation League. And one time I came to him about an issue I was having with this sort of people having narrow feelings about who should be saying what. Because I'm very, very average. I'm very average sized. So there are people who are really, really much more marginalized than I am any given day. And he basically said he got advice from someone who'd been doing the bias work for a really long time, who said there are many roads to the same place. And I appreciate you and the road that you're making. So thank you, Christy, for being such an ally. And God, I'm going to go back and listen to this because so much of what you said I want to sink into my brain so that I can say it to other people.
And definitely check out Christy's social media, because she gives you all these wonderful little bite-sized quotes that you can give to people when they're giving you fat phobic bullshit. You could just be like, oh, true. Really? Well, Christy Harrison said, blah, blah, blah.
Yes. And her podcast is Food Psych. Her book is Anti-Diet. Get all of the things. Christy, when you come back here, we can't wait to host you and actually drink a thing with you.
Oh, I cannot wait. Thank you so much. It's
thank
so lovely
you.
to
Stay
talk with
safe.
you both.
And Nikki, thank you for being here. Guys,
My pleasure.
I'm trying to do my best to do this every other week because money is tight. But if you want to help me out and give me a little Patreon, I may be able to get back to it every week. But for now, I have to say, see you in 2 weeks live here at Plus This. Take care. Plus This.